An elderly woman noticed a young girl in tears at her daughter's grave. As she moved closer, she felt her heart drop at the strange words the girl was quietly whispering. Emma took slow, deliberate steps through the quiet paths of Phoenix Cemetery. She was holding a small bouquet of white flowers in one hand, and in the other, an old, faded photograph. The memories of her daughter, Claire, seemed to float around her, making each step heavier. When she arrived at her daughter's grave, marked with the name Cille Scott, she knelt with a soft groan. She placed the photograph and the flowers gently on the cold stone, a small offering for a daughter she would never see again. "Another year, my dear," Emma said softly, her voice breaking the heavy silence. "It feels like just yesterday you were here with me, laughing, walking around. How I wish things were different." Her fingers traced the edges of the photo, her touch lingering on Claire's smiling face. Even now, after all this time, the memories of her daughter were still so clear. Every laugh, every hug, every farewell, it all rushed back to her in waves. Claire Scott had been full of life. At just 28 years old, she had worked as a graphic designer for a successful marketing company. Known for her creativity, sharp wit, and infectious smile, she could light up any room. The day Claire died, 3 years ago, was a shock that left Emma broken. Claire's death came suddenly in a car accident. She had been on her way home from a business trip when her car slid on a slick curve and smashed into a pole. The impact was so violent that it was almost impossible to identify her remains. Emma had been told she died on the spot, and the details of the accident were explained away quickly. It had happened during a stormy night, after all. The tragedy left a hole in Emma's heart. Claire was her only child, her closest family. Losing her felt like losing a piece of herself. Each visit to the grave had become a ritual, a moment when Emma could almost feel Claire's presence. "Could I have done something to stop this?" Emma whispered, tears welling up as she gazed at the headstone. The words "beloved daughter" were carved into the stone, and Emma ran her fingers over them, as though somehow she could feel her daughter's spirit. "I miss you so much." As she sat there in the quiet of the cemetery, her mind clouded with sadness and guilt, the sudden sound of crying caught her attention. Emma looked around, her eyes searching. She saw a small girl standing by a nearby grave, tears streaming down her face. The girl was speaking in broken words, her voice filled with grief. "Mommy, why did you die? I wish you were here with me. I love you so much. I miss you so much," the girl sobbed. Emma felt a rush of maternal instinct, and with concern, she slowly walked over to the child. "Hello, dear," she said gently, her voice full of kindness. "Are you okay?" The girl lifted her tear-streaked face, her expression filled with sorrow and confusion. "I always come here," she said, sobbing between words. "This is my mommy's grave, but I don't understand. Why does it say someone else's name? It says Cille Scott, but that's not her name. I'm so confused." The innocent confusion in the girl's eyes hit Emma hard, like a punch to the stomach. She knelt down beside the child, her heart aching for the little one who seemed so lost. "Let's figure this out together, okay?" Emma said, wrapping her arm around the girl's tiny shoulders. "What's your name?" "Samantha," the girl replied, managing a faint smile despite her tears. "Samantha Lewis." Emma nodded, understanding her deep sadness. She wanted to help, to make sense of the confusion surrounding the grave. Perhaps, Emma thought, helping Samantha could offer some kind of solace for the shadows of grief that haunted her own heart. "Samantha, tell me more about your mommy," Emma asked softly, her heart swelling with sympathy. "I want to understand." Samantha wiped her eyes with a handkerchief Emma offered her and began to speak in a quiet, trembling voice. "My mommy, her name was Anna Lewis. I remember her always smiling and singing to me. But she left me when I was just 5 years old," Samantha whispered, her words barely audible. "They told me she got really sick and passed away, and they said she was buried here." Emma nodded, trying to comfort the little girl. Just then, a man approached them. He looked troubled, as though the situation was weighing heavily on him. "It's true," the man said, his voice filled with sadness. "I've brought Samantha here many times. I always told her that her mommy was resting in peace. But I didn't understand why the name on the headstone was different. Samantha's father, Jorge, looked at the headstone with a mixture of confusion and despair. I thought it was just a mistake, maybe a bureaucratic error. But when I saw the name CLA Scott on the stone, I didn't know what to think. We were so overwhelmed with grief that we never questioned it the way we should have. Emma could hear the pain in his voice, and she felt a rush of empathy for both of them. The confusion, the sadness, the helplessness. She knew exactly what they were feeling. Jorge, I believe something very wrong happened here, Emma said firmly, her voice steady with determination. I'm going to help you find the answers. Not just for your daughter, but for my Claire too. I won't rest until we understand what happened. Jorge looked at her with a mixture of relief and gratitude. Thank you, Emma. Having someone who understands, who's willing to help, it means everything to us. Samantha deserves to know where her mother is truly resting. Emma placed a reassuring hand on the girl's shoulder, her heart heavy with the realization that the mystery surrounding the grave was just the beginning of a much darker truth. Let's start by looking at the cemetery records, Emma said, her voice steady. Maybe there was some kind of mistake. We need to get to the bottom of this. They all agreed to go to the cemetery office, where they hoped to find answers. Emma spoke to the employee behind the counter, explaining the situation. We need to see the records for the grave marked as CLA Scott, Emma said, her voice firm. There may have been a mistake, and we need to clear this up for the sake of a child who lost her mother. The employee, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, nodded and began searching through the files. This is strange, he muttered, but assured them he would check. After a few minutes of silence, he looked up, his expression a mix of surprise and concern. There's something odd about the records. There was an internal notice about a mix-up in the marking of graves a few years ago, the man said. I'll need to investigate further. I can't give you details just yet, but I'll do what I can. Emma felt a mix of relief and apprehension. Please do. We need answers. After thanking the employee, they left the office, each of them feeling like they were one step closer to understanding what had gone wrong. Emma knew they couldn't stop now. She decided to reach out to a professional who could help her get the truth. The next day, Emma found herself sitting in the office of Dr. Raphael Adrian, a man known for his calm and reassuring demeanor. Thank you for seeing me, Dr. Adrian, Emma said, her voice betraying the tension she had been carrying for months. I'm here with a very delicate matter. Dr. Adrian looked at her with kind, professional eyes. Please, Mrs. Adams, tell me how I can help. Emma took a deep breath before speaking. There's confusion about a grave in the local cemetery. It's supposed to be my daughter's, but now I'm beginning to think it's not her remains buried there. I need your help to confirm the identity of the body. Dr. Adrian nodded, his expression serious. I understand. Conducting a DNA test on remains is a complicated process, but it's not impossible. We'll need legal permission, of course. Emma assured him that she would start handling the necessary paperwork immediately. Once we have the authorization, we can proceed, Dr. Adrian said, jotting down a few notes. I'll make sure everything is in place on my end. Brandon's investigation continued. He and Emma were parked a little distance from an old, abandoned factory on the outskirts of Phoenix, the kind of place that whispered secrets in the shadows. The location had been mentioned by an informant who Brandon had been keeping an eye on. He adjusted his binoculars, scanning the building, his eyes narrowing as he spoke. This is the place, Brandon said quietly, his voice steady but full of urgency. My contact said this place has been used for illegal meetings, and he mentioned Claire's name a few times. Emma felt a rush of emotions as she stared at the rundown factory through the dirty car window. Anxiety, mixed with a flicker of hope, swirled in her chest. She couldn't help but ask, do you think she could be there right now? Brandon paused, his gaze fixed on the building. I don't know, he answered honestly. But something big is happening here, and we need to find out what it is. We'll wait until it gets darker. Going in now would be too risky. Emma nodded, her hands gripping the edge of the seat, her heart pounding with every passing minute. Caution was their best ally now, and they couldn't afford to rush things. As the hours passed, and the day started fading into night, The building was swallowed by shadows. Brandon glanced at his watch. It's time. We need to move quickly and quietly. Are you ready? Emma took a deep breath and gave him a determined nod. I'm ready. Let's find my daughter. They moved swiftly, their steps almost soundless as they approached the building. The door was slightly ajar, as if someone had left in a hurry and forgotten to close it properly. Brandon led the way, his body tense, his senses alert. Emma followed close behind, her heart racing. They stepped inside, into the dimly lit interior of the factory. The silence was thick, broken only by the distant sound of water dripping and the occasional squeak of a rat skittering across the floor. As they explored the building, they found signs that it had been used recently. There were discarded cigarette butts, empty food cans, and, most disturbingly, a woman's coat. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she recognized it instantly. "This is Claire's coat," she whispered, her voice trembling. "She was here." Brandon placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, his voice calm but filled with purpose. "We're close. We'll figure this out." They continued to move cautiously through the dark corridors of the factory. As they neared a lit room, they heard low voices. Brandon signaled to Emma to remain silent and led her closer. They crept toward the slightly open door, peeking through. Inside, they saw a woman with her back to them, talking to someone out of sight. Emma's heart skipped a beat as she recognized the woman's posture and movements. "Claire," Emma whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Unable to hold herself back, Emma stepped forward, calling out her daughter's name louder than she intended. "Claire!" The woman turned sharply, startled and defensive. "Who are you? How do you know that name?" Her voice was filled with suspicion, her eyes darting around, trying to spot the source of the call. Emma froze for a moment, her pulse racing. The shock of seeing her daughter again after so long was overwhelming. Despite the changes, despite the time and circumstances that had altered her appearance, Emma knew it was her. "It's me, Emma. Your mother," she said softly, taking a cautious step forward. Her hands were outstretched in a gesture of peace, hoping to bridge the gap between them. "CLA, I know it's you," Emma continued, her voice trembling. "We've been looking for you for so long." Tears started to well in Emma's eyes as she spoke, her heart heavy with relief and fear all at once. Claire's eyes flickered with recognition, mixed with confusion and hesitation. She looked at her mother for a long moment, her expression changing, uncertainty clouding her face. "Mom," Claire whispered, her voice barely audible. The walls around her began to crumble, and the cold, hardened exterior she had worn for so long seemed to soften. Claire stepped back, her gaze filled with fear. "You shouldn't be here," she said in a shaky voice. "It's too dangerous. You need to leave. I can't risk something happening to you too." Emma's heart ached at her daughter's words. But there was no way she was going to leave her alone. Not again. "I'm not going anywhere, Claire," Emma said firmly, her voice full of resolve. "Wherever you are is where I need to be. We're in this together, no matter what." Claire tried to protest, her worry written all over her face. "Mom, please," she begged. "I don't want you to get hurt because of me." Emma gently squeezed Claire's hands, looking her straight in the eyes. "There is no place in the world I'd rather be than by your side. Nothing will take me away from you, my daughter. We'll fix this together." Claire seemed to be wrestling with her emotions. She looked down, her eyes brimming with tears, and slowly nodded, finally surrendering to the truth. "I had to do this," Claire began, her voice filled with pain. "I had to disappear. It was the only way to protect all of us." Emma could hardly believe what she was hearing, but her heart ached as Claire continued to speak. "It started with small things, favors that seemed harmless. But then it grew. I realized I was in something way deeper, something more dangerous than I could have imagined." Emma listened, her heart breaking with every word. "They started threatening my friends, our family," Claire said, her voice shaking with fear. "I was scared, Mom. They told me the only way to ensure everyone's safety was if I disappeared. So we planned my fake death." She paused, swallowing hard, the weight of the confession weighing on her chest. "I didn't know what else to do. I changed my identity, went far away, just to protect the people I love. I wanted to tell you, but every move I made, they were watching me. It wasn't a real life. I couldn't live like that anymore. Emma felt her world shift as she processed the truth. She reached out, taking Claire's hands in hers, her own hands trembling. "My dear," Emma whispered, "what you've been through, I can't even imagine. But now that we know the truth, we can help you. We'll find a way to end this. We'll bring you home." Claire's eyes filled with tears again as she looked at her mother. "I'm so tired, Mom," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tired of hiding, tired of living in fear. I just want to go home, but I'm scared of what might happen if I do." Emma squeezed her daughter's hands. "What you did was incredibly risky, and I'm hurt that I didn't know anything about it. But now, we need to focus on what we can do to make things right. We'll fix this, Claire. We'll get you back home." Claire's gaze fell to the floor, the weight of her choices heavy on her heart. "I know, Mom," she whispered. "I'm so sorry for everything. I wanted to protect our family, but I know I ended up doing more harm than good." Emma didn't let go of her hands. "We'll need a lawyer," she said, her mind already turning to the practical side of things. "Someone who can help us deal with the legal issues. And we'll need to talk to the police, explain everything that happened, and why you faked your death." Emma's voice was firm as she spoke. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, and the truth she was hearing now would lead to more painful revelations. But she was resolved. "I'll be by your side, Claire. No matter what happens, we won't let you face this alone." Claire nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, Mom. I don't know if I deserve all this, but I'm so grateful you're here." Emma held her daughter's hand, offering the comfort she had longed for. "You're my daughter, and nothing will ever change that. Together, we'll get through this. It won't be easy, but we're strong. We always have been." Their bond was unshakable, stronger than any fear or uncertainty. Now more than ever, they needed each other to rebuild their lives. And they would, together. Even in the darkest moments, Emma and Brandon shared a quiet smile, feeling a sense of belief and happiness that they hadn't felt in a long time. "There's no need for thanks, CLA," Emma said, her voice steady. "We're family, and families take care of each other." Brandon nodded in agreement, adding, "Exactly. And now, we'll move forward together." These words, full of love and commitment, deepened their bond. The challenges they'd faced had only strengthened their resolve to support each other through whatever came next. Back at the cemetery, where everything had started, Emma and Claire walked slowly through the rows of graves. The day was cloudy, a soft breeze rustling the leaves of the trees, bringing with it a peaceful silence. They approached the grave that had once held so much pain and mystery. The headstone, still bearing CLA's name, stood as a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. But now there was a chance to make things right. Emma held a new plaque in her hands, one that would finally reveal the truth. "We're here to do what's right, CLA. It's time to correct the mistakes of the past," Emma said, her voice firm yet full of emotion. Claire nodded, helping her mother remove the old headstone and carefully place the new one. "I never imagined things would end up like this, Mom," she said, her voice a mix of disbelief and quiet reflection. "It's strange to be here, not as the person buried, but as someone who still has a chance to make things right." Their hands worked together, symbolizing the physical and emotional rebuilding of their lives. "Your name will now be remembered as it should be," Emma said as they finished installing the new plaque. "And the person who rests here can finally have peace." Emma stepped back, gazing at the newly revealed name on the stone. It now read, Anna Lewis, the true name of the woman who had been buried under the false identity of CLA Scott. Claire placed fresh flowers in front of the new headstone, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry for everything, Anna. And thank you, Mom, for standing by me. Even when I didn't deserve it," she whispered, looking at Emma with a mixture of gratitude and remorse. Emma embraced Claire, holding her tightly. "We'll overcome this together. What matters is that you're here now, and we're fixing the past. That's what families do. They support each other, no matter what." They left the grave behind, carrying with them not only the truth, but also a chapter in their lives they hoped to close. It was time for a fresh start, one they would take on together, stronger than before. As the investigation progressed and things slowly returned to normal, Claire and Jorge grew closer. They began to open up about their lives, their fears, and their hopes. One afternoon, after a long session of reviewing documents and planning their next steps, they sat alone in a small cafe near Brandon's office. Over coffee, Jorge looked at Claire with admiration. "Silly," he began, his voice filled with respect. "I always knew you were incredibly strong and determined. Seeing you fight so hard for your family, it makes me respect you even more." Claire smiled, touched by his words. "Thank you, Jorge. It's been a tough journey, but knowing I'm not alone makes all the difference. Your support, as well as Emma's and Samantha's, gives me the strength to keep going." As their meetings became more frequent, the respect and admiration between Jorge and Claire evolved into something deeper. One afternoon, as they walked through the park, Jorge hesitated before speaking. "Claire, I've started to feel something more for you," he confessed, his heart racing. "Over these months, you've become an important part of my life." Claire stopped, surprised but happy. "I feel the same way, Jorge," she replied. "I was afraid to say anything, didn't want to complicate things, but I'm glad you feel the same." With the mystery of the headstones finally resolved, Claire and Jorge decided to take their relationship further. They found comfort and love in each other. Two hearts that had been tested by adversity, but now united in the hope of a shared future. Emma and Samantha, seeing the happiness between the two, gave their full support, happy to see joy beginning to blossom in their lives once more. One sunny afternoon, Emma, Claire, and Samantha met at a local park, a place that now symbolized their new beginning. Emma sat on a bench, watching Claire and Samantha kick a soccer ball on the grass. "It feels good to see you both together like this," Emma said, as Claire sat beside her to rest. "It feels like we can finally breathe again." Claire smiled, looking at Samantha, who was running joyfully across the field. "I would never have made it through all of this without you, Mom. And without Samantha. She's like the daughter I never had." Samantha ran over to them and jumped into Emma's arms, laughing. "Grandma, will you come play with us?" she asked, her energy infectious. "Of course, dear. Let's see if I still know how to play soccer," Emma said with a grin, getting up and following Samantha back to the field, feeling a joy she hadn't felt in years. As they played, Claire watched them, her heart full of gratitude. "You know, Mom," she said, "I think we finally understand what's truly important. No matter what happened, we're together now. That's what counts." Claire kicked the ball back to Samantha, who squealed with joy. As the sun began to set, the three of them walked back home, hand in hand. Emma looked at Claire and Samantha, a wave of love and protection filling her heart. "We are in this together," she said, squeezing their hands. And together, they would face whatever the future held.